The delivery room monitor flatlined for 12 seconds. 12 seconds where my heart stopped beating while my newborn daughter took her first breath. The medical team rushed around me, shouting medical terms I couldn't understand through the haze of emergency drugs. My vision blurred as consciousness slipped away. But I could hear my mother-in-law Patricia's voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Is the baby healthy? David needs to know immediately. He's dealing with something important right now. Not is Emma okay? Not will she survive? Just whether the baby was fine so her precious son wouldn't be inconvenienced. As the darkness closed in, I realized this moment would change everything. I thought I knew about my marriage. The story really begins 3 days earlier, when I was rushed to Phoenix General Medical Center with severe preeclampsia. My blood pressure had skyrocketed to dangerous levels, and Dr. Sarah Williams insisted on immediate bed rest and monitoring. The pregnancy had been difficult from the start, with constant nausea, swelling, and exhaustion that left me barely functional for months. David seemed frustrated by my condition, often commenting that other women worked right up until delivery. Ashley from the office is 6 months along, and she's still putting in 12-hour days, he'd say, comparing me to his young assistant, who seemed to glow with that perfect pregnancy radiance I never experienced. Maybe you should ask her for tips on staying active. The mention of Ashley always made my stomach clench, though I couldn't pinpoint why. She was 24, fresh out of college, with long auburn hair and the kind of energy that made everyone gravitate toward her. David had hired her 8 months ago to help with his expanding real estate business, and she quickly became indispensable. Too indispensable, if I was being honest with myself. When the contractions started at 37 weeks, David was in the middle of closing a major commercial deal. Patricia arrived at the hospital before he did, her designer handbag clutched tightly as she surveyed the sterile maternity ward with obvious distaste. "This is quite sudden," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. "David mentioned you've been having false alarms. Are you certain this is the real thing?" The nurse checking my vitals looked shocked at her dismissive tone, but I was used to Patricia's way of making everything sound like an inconvenience. She had never approved of David marrying someone from my background, as she delicately put it. My father was a mechanic, my mother a school secretary, and we lived in a modest house in Tempe, rather than the exclusive Paradise Valley enclave where the Chen family resided. The contractions are 3 minutes apart and getting stronger. I managed between waves of pain. Dr. Williams says the baby needs to come tonight. Patricia's lips pursed in that familiar expression of disapproval. Well, I suppose we can't control timing. I just hope this doesn't interfere with David's presentation tomorrow. The Meridian contract could set his career trajectory for the next decade. Even in labor, his career took precedence over his wife and unborn child. I should have seen the pattern earlier, but love has a way of clouding judgment. David and I had met during my senior year at Arizona State University, where he was completing his MBA. He was charming, ambitious, and made me feel like I was the center of his universe. Our courtship was a whirlwind of expensive dinners, weekend trips to Sedona, and promises of a future filled with adventure and success. The wedding was everything Patricia wanted, expensive, and designed to showcase the Chen family status in Phoenix society. My parents seemed overwhelmed by the grandeur, but David assured me that family was what mattered most. They spoke passionately about building a life together, about children who would grow up knowing they were loved and supported by both sides of their heritage. Those promises felt hollow now as I labored alone while he finished his business call in the hospital corridor. Through the partially open door, I could hear fragments of his conversation. His voice animated and engaged in ways it hadn't been. "With me in months, Ashley, you're brilliant. That clause about the zoning variance could save us hundreds of thousands. Yes, I know it's late, but this is exactly why I need you on my team. Don't worry about tomorrow's meeting. We'll celebrate properly once everything's finalized." The way he said her name made something cold settle in my chest. There was an intimacy there, a warmth that used to be reserved for me. Patricia noticed my reaction and followed my gaze to where David paced in the hallway, phone pressed to his ear. Ashley Martinez has been invaluable to David's success, she said, her tone carefully neutral. Intelligent young woman from a good family. Her father owns several restaurants in Scottsdale, and she graduated summa cum laude from the business program. The implication hung in the air between us. Ashley was everything I wasn't: young, successful, from the right kind of family. Patricia had never said it directly, but her message was clear. David could have done better. Another contraction hit, stronger than before, and I gripped the hospital bed rails until my knuckles went white. The pain was becoming unbearable, but what hurt more was the growing realization that I was facing this alone. David finally ended his call and entered the room, checking his expensive watch with obvious impatience. "How much longer is this supposed to take?" he asked Dr. Williams, who had just finished checking my progress. "Have an early meeting. Tomorrow that I really can't reschedule?" The doctor's expression remained professional, but I caught the slight tightening around her eyes. "Babies come on their own schedule, Mr. Chen. Based on Emma's condition, we're looking at several more hours of labor, possibly longer." David's frustration was palpable. He pulled out his phone again, typing rapidly. "I need to update the team." "About tomorrow's timeline?" "Ashley's been coordinating with the clients, and she'll need to adjust the presentation schedule." There she was again. Ashley, Ashley, Ashley. Even during labor, she was more important than his wife. I wanted to scream, to demand his attention, to force him to see what was happening right in front of him. Instead, I closed my eyes and tried to focus on breathing through the next wave of pain. Patricia moved closer to David, speaking in low tones that I strained to hear over the hospital equipment. "Perhaps you should call Ashley and ask her to handle tomorrow's meeting entirely. This could take all night, and you need to be fresh for something that important." "I've already thought of that," David replied. "She's incredibly capable. Honestly, I don't know what I'd do without her." The words hit me like a physical blow. When had I stopped being the person he couldn't do without? When had Ashley become more essential to his life than the woman carrying his child? Labor progressed slowly and painfully. David alternated between pacing the room and stepping into the corridor for phone calls, always returning with updates about work that somehow involved Ashley's suggestions, Ashley's insights, Ashley's solutions. Patricia divided her time between criticizing the hospital staff and making veiled comments about modern women. Couldn't handle childbirth the way previous generations did. "My mother delivered 5 children without any of this medical intervention," she said, watching disapprovingly as the nurse adjusted my 4. "Women today seem to require so much assistance with what should be a natural process." The pain medication wasn't working effectively. My blood pressure continued to climb despite the medical team's efforts. Dr. Williams looked increasingly concerned each time she checked my readings. But when I asked about the risks, she spoke in careful medical terminology that didn't quite hide her worry. "We're monitoring the situation closely," she assured me. "If your blood pressure doesn't stabilize soon, we may need to consider other options." David barely looked up from his phone when the doctor spoke. He was deep in another conversation with Ashley, planning contingencies for tomorrow's presentation. As if nothing else in the world mattered. Patricia, meanwhile, had shifted her focus to criticizing the hospital's visiting policies and complaining about the uncomfortable chairs in the maternity ward. As the hours stretched on, I began to feel like a stranger in my own life. Here I was, bringing David's child into the world, and yet I felt invisible, insignificant, compared to whatever crisis Ashley was helping him solve at the office. The emotional distance hurt more than the physical pain, creating a hollow ache in my chest that no medication could touch. Around midnight, my condition took a dramatic turn for the worse. The blood pressure monitor began alarming constantly, and Dr. Williams made the decision to perform an emergency cesarean section. The room suddenly filled with medical personnel preparing for surgery, their movements efficient and urgent. "Hey, David," I called out weakly, reaching for his hand as they prepared to wheel me to the operating room. "I'm scared." He looked up from his phone, seeming almost surprised to find me there. "Everything will be fine," he said absently, but his attention was already drifting back to the screen. "Ashley just sent the revised contracts, and I need to review them before." "Mr. Chen," Dr. Williams interrupted firmly, "your wife is going into emergency surgery. I need you to understand that this is a serious situation requiring your full attention." For a moment, David seemed to grasp the gravity of what was happening. He put away his phone and took my hand, squeezing gently. "You're going to be okay," he said, and for a brief instant, I saw a glimpse of the man I'd fallen in love with. But as they wheeled me toward the operating room, I heard Patricia's voice following us down the corridor. "David, dear, you should probably let Ashley know you might be delayed tomorrow. She'll need to adjust the entire presentation schedule." Even as I faced the possibility of death and surgery, Ashley remained their primary concern. The anesthesia began to take effect as I was transferred to the operating table, but my last conscious thought was a devastating realization. Somewhere along the way, I had become secondary in my own marriage. The surgery was touch and go. My blood pressure crashed twice during the procedure, and there were moments when the medical team wasn't certain I would survive. My daughter Sophia was born healthy, but the trauma to my body was severe. Internal bleeding required additional surgery, and my recovery would be long and complicated. When I finally woke up in the intensive care unit, groggy and disoriented, the first voice I heard wasn't David's. It was Patricia, speaking quietly to someone on the phone just outside my room. "The baby is perfect, thank goodness. 10 fingers, 10 toes, beautiful little girl. Emma had some complications, but she's stable now. Yes, David is here, but he's been on calls all morning. The Meridian deal is at a crucial stage, and Ashley has been managing everything brilliantly in his absence." My heart sank as I realized that even my brush with death hadn't been enough to shift their priorities. Patricia continued her conversation, apparently unaware that I was conscious and listening. "Honestly, I think this whole experience has been harder on David than anyone realizes. It's the stress of almost losing the deal because of timing. Ashley has been such a support system for him. She even came by earlier to bring him coffee and the updated contracts. Such a thoughtful girl." Ashley had been here.
At the hospital where I lay recovering from life-threatening surgery.
She had come to see my husband. The betrayal cut deeper than any surgical incision. A nurse entered to check my vitals, and Patricia quickly ended her call. "Oh, good. You're awake," she said with forced brightness. "The baby is absolutely beautiful, Emma. David is so proud." "Where is he?" I asked weakly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Conference call with the investors," Patricia replied smoothly. "The timing is unfortunate, but business can't wait. Ashley is coordinating everything from the office, and David needs to be available for any decisions." As if summoned by our conversation, David appeared in the doorway, phone pressed to his ear. He held up one finger, indicating he needed another moment to finish his call. Through the door, I could hear him speaking in warm, appreciative tones. "Ashley, you've outdone yourself." The presentation was flawless. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I know. I wish I could have been there to see their faces when you revealed the profit projections. Dinner tomorrow night to celebrate? Absolutely. You've earned it. Dinner tomorrow night with Ashley. To celebrate a deal that had been more important than his wife's life. David finally entered the room, slipping his phone into his pocket with obvious reluctance. "Hey," he said, approaching my bed with what looked like genuine concern. "How are you feeling?" "Like I almost died," I replied honestly, studying his face for any real reaction. "But you didn't," he said quickly, as if my near-death experience was simply an obstacle that had been overcome. "Sophia is perfect. The doctors say she's in excellent health." "What about me, David? How is my health?" He seemed taken aback by the question. "You're going to be fine," Dr. Williams said. "The recovery will take some time. But there shouldn't be any long-term effects." Patricia interjected from her position by the window. "Emma, dear, you should focus on resting and getting your strength back. David has been under enormous pressure with this Meridian contract, and the timing of everything has been quite stressful for him." The message was clear. My medical emergency had been an inconvenience for David, and I should be grateful for whatever attention he could spare. The realization settled over me like a heavy blanket, suffocating and undeniable. Over the next few days in the hospital, a pattern emerged that would define my understanding of where I truly stood in David's life. He visited twice daily, but each visit was punctuated by phone calls and text messages that required his immediate attention. Ashley's name came up constantly. She was handling client meetings, rescheduling appointments, coordinating with contractors, and apparently managing David's entire professional life with remarkable efficiency. "She's been amazing," David said. During one visit, scrolling through his messages while I tried to breastfeed Sophia, yesterday she caught an error in the zoning paperwork that could have cost us the entire deal. I don't know how I managed before she joined the team. The question hung unspoken in the air. How had he managed? He'd managed with me. For the first 2 years of our marriage, I had been his sounding board, his research assistant, his emotional support through every business challenge. But that was before Ashley arrived with her youth, her energy, and her apparent indispensability. Patricia's visits were even more telling. She cooed over Sophia, took dozens of photos, and spoke constantly about how beautiful the baby was, how proud the Chen family was to have such a perfect addition. But her questions about my recovery were perfunctory. Medical inquiries that felt more like checking boxes than genuine concern. "When will you be able to return to normal activities?" she asked during one visit while holding Sophia. "David needs support getting back to his regular schedule. This whole situation has disrupted so many important meetings." Activities. As if I hadn't just undergone major surgery after nearly dying in childbirth. As if my body wasn't still healing from trauma that would take months to fully recover from. But in Patricia's world, my value was measured by how quickly I could resume supporting David's career and managing the household duties that kept his life running smoothly. The breaking point came on my 4th day in the hospital. I was finally feeling strong enough to walk around the maternity ward when I overheard a conversation that shattered the last of my illusions about my marriage. David was in the corridor, supposedly taking a work call, but the tone was different from his usual business conversations. Softer, more intimate, filled with laughter and warmth that I hadn't heard directed at me in months. "I miss you too," he was saying quietly. "This whole week has been insane, but knowing you're handling everything makes it bearable." I know. We'll make up for lost time once things settle down. Tuesday works perfectly, the usual place." My blood ran cold as the implications sank in. This wasn't about work. This was about Ashley, and whatever was happening between them had clearly progressed far beyond professional collaboration. I stood frozen in the hallway, my post-operative wounds aching, listening to my husband make plans. With another woman, while I recovered from bringing his child into the world, the conversation continued for several more minutes, filled with inside jokes and references to shared experiences that excluded me entirely. When David finally returned to my room, his demeanor had shifted back to the distracted, dutiful husband mode he'd maintained throughout my hospital stay. But now I could see it for what it was, an act, performance designed to maintain appearances, while his real emotional investment lay elsewhere. "Everything okay?" I asked carefully, settling back into the hospital bed. "Just work stuff," he replied automatically, not meeting my eyes. "Ashley's coordinating with the subcontractors on the Meridian project. And there are some scheduling conflicts we need to resolve." The lie came so easily, so smoothly, that I realized this wasn't the first time he'd deceived me. How many? Work calls had actually been personal conversations with Ashley. How many late nights at the office had been something else entirely? That night, unable to sleep despite my exhaustion, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to find out exactly what was happening between my husband and Ashley Martinez. But first, I needed to get home and regain my strength. The truth could wait a little longer, but it couldn't hide forever. As I held Sophia close, feeling her tiny heartbeat against my chest, I promised myself that I would never again be secondary in my own life. Whatever was coming next, I would face it with my eyes wide open and my dignity intact. The story was just beginning. Coming home from the hospital felt like entering a foreign country where I no longer spoke the language. David carried Sophia's car seat while I moved slowly up the walkway to our Scottsdale home. Each step a reminder of how my body had been torn apart and stitched back together. The desert heat was unforgiving even in early evening. But the air conditioning inside our house felt sterile and unwelcoming. Patricia had already arrived and taken charge of everything. The nursery was perfectly arranged, the refrigerator stocked, with prepared meals and a detailed schedule for Sophia's feeding and sleeping posted on the kitchen bulletin board. She greeted us at the door with the efficiency of a general organizing a military campaign. "Emma, you need to go straight to bed and rest," she announced, reaching for Sophia before I'd even set down my hospital bag. "David, I've arranged for a night nurse for the first week, and I'll be staying in the guest room to supervise everything." The assumption that I couldn't care for my own daughter stung, that I was too exhausted to argue. Dr. Williams had been clear about my limitations. During recovery, warning against lifting anything heavier than the baby and emphasizing the importance of rest. But having Patricia orchestrate my homecoming made me feel like a patient being managed rather than a mother returning with her newborn. David seemed relieved by his mother's take-charge attitude. "It's perfect, Mom. I have 3 client meetings tomorrow that I can't reschedule, and Ashley's arranged a site visit for the new commercial development. With everything you've organized, I won't have to worry about anything at home." Ashley, again. Her name had become a constant refrain in our conversations, and each mention felt like a small needle prick. I settled into the living room while Patricia bustled around, adjusting baby items and explaining her systems to the night nurse. A stern woman named Mrs. Patterson, who arrived precisely at 7 o'clock. "Mrs. Chen, Mrs. Patterson," addressed me formally. "I understand you've had a difficult delivery. My role is to handle all nighttime feedings, so you can focus on healing. Mrs. Chen Sr. has briefed me on the family's preferences for maintaining routine. Patricia's preferences, not mine." Once again, my wishes as Sophia's mother seemed irrelevant in the face of Patricia's organizational skills. David was already buried in his laptop, responding to emails from Ashley about tomorrow's schedule, occasionally laughing at something on his screen. "What's so funny?" I asked, though part of me dreaded the answer. "Ashley sent photos from the Meridian site," he replied, turning the screen toward me. "She's wearing a hard hat and safety vest, trying to look serious, but she's making these ridiculous faces. She has such a great sense of humor." The photo showed Ashley posing playfully at the construction site, her auburn hair flowing from beneath a bright yellow hard hat, her smile radiant and carefree. She looked vibrant and alive in ways I couldn't remember feeling in months. David's expression as he looked at the images was soft and affectionate, the way he used to look at pictures of us during our early relationship. Over the following days, a routine emerged that gradually revealed the true dynamics of our household. David left early each morning for work, usually after receiving a text from Ashley about their schedule. Patricia took charge of Sophia's care with military precision, often dismissing my attempts to establish my own rhythm with my daughter. "Emma, dear, you're holding her incorrectly," Patricia would say, demonstrating the proper technique. "Need consistency?" And Mrs. Patterson has been following the schedule perfectly. We don't want to confuse Sophia with different approaches. My attempts to breastfeed were met with criticism about my milk supply and suggestions that formula might be more reliable. When I tried to soothe Sophia during crying spells, Patricia intervened with comments about spoiling the baby or disrupting established routines. Gradually, I began to feel like a guest in my own home, relegated to observer status in my daughter's life. David's work demands seemed to intensify rather than accommodate his new role as a father. He left earlier, stayed later, and spent most of his time at home, on phone calls or video conferences. Ashley's presence in these conversations was constant and increasingly intimate. "Ashley, you're a lifesaver," I heard him say during one evening call. "I don't know how you manage to anticipate exactly what I need." "Yes, dinner tomorrow sounds perfect. Need to celebrate closing the Henderson deal properly." Dinner again. These celebrations were becoming frequent, always involving Ashley, always excluding me. When I mentioned feeling left out, David brushed off my concerns with practiced explanations about networking and business relationships. "Ashley's not just an assistant anymore," he explained one evening while reviewing contracts at the kitchen table. "She's becoming a real partner in the business." These dinners are strategic meetings about expanding our client base. Strategic meetings that apparently required intimate restaurants and prolonged absences. David's explanations grew more elaborate and less convincing as the weeks passed, but challenging them required energy I didn't possess during those early days of recovery. The breaking point in my awareness came during Sophia's 6-week pediatric appointment. Dr. Williams wanted to see both Sophia and me for follow-up examinations. Checking the baby's development and my postpartum healing, David had promised to attend, calling it an important milestone appointment that required both parents' presence. That morning, he dressed carefully in his best suit and spent extra time on his appearance, styling his hair and selecting expensive cologne. When I commented on his formal attire for a doctor's appointment, he explained that he had an important client lunch immediately afterward. Ashley's been working on the preliminary designs for the new project, he said, adjusting his tie. Presenting to potential investors today, and first impressions matter in this business. We arrived at the pediatric clinic early. Sophia charmed everyone with her alertness and healthy development. Dr. Williams pronounced her progress excellent and began examining my surgical incisions and overall recovery. Everything was healing. Well, but she emphasized the ongoing need for rest and limited physical activity. Your body has been through significant trauma, Dr. Williams explained, while David checked his phone repeatedly. Full recovery can take several months, and you shouldn't push yourself too hard too soon. David's phone buzzed with a text message, and his face lit up as he read it. Ashley's confirmed the lunch reservation, he announced, as if this was relevant to our daughter's medical appointment. She found this amazing place in downtown Phoenix that serves authentic Italian food. The investors will be impressed. Dr. Williams looked between us with obvious concern. Chen, are you able to provide adequate support at home while Emma recovers? This is a crucial period for both mother and baby. Of course, David replied automatically, though his attention remained divided between his phone and the conversation. My mother has been helping tremendously, and we have professional support is needed. Professional support. As if hiring help absolved him of personal responsibility for his family's welfare. Dr. Williams's expression remained professionally neutral, but I caught the slight tightening around her eyes that suggested disapproval. After the appointment, David walked us to the car, but seemed agitated about the time. I need to head straight to the restaurant, he said, glancing at his watch. Ashley's probably already there, setting up for the presentation. Can't you come home first? I asked, feeling suddenly exhausted by the morning's activities. Sophia might need a nap, and I'd like some help getting her settled. David's jaw tightened with impatience. Emma, this lunch could determine the entire future of the business. Ashley has worked incredibly hard preparing for this presentation, and I can't let her down. Can't let her down. But apparently, he could let down his wife and newborn daughter without a second thought. I watched him drive away toward his lunch with Ashley, leaving me to manage Sophia's car seat and diaper bag alone, despite my physical limitations. That afternoon, while Sophia napped and Patricia attended her bridge club, I made a decision that felt both necessary and terrifying. I was going to discover the truth about David and Ashley's relationship, regardless of what it might reveal about my marriage. I started with David's laptop, which he'd left open on the kitchen counter in his rush to leave for lunch. His email was still logged in, and my heart pounded as I scrolled through recent messages. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. The professional correspondence was there, certainly, but interwoven with personal messages that revealed a relationship far beyond business partnership. Ashley's emails were flirtatious and familiar, filled with inside jokes and references to shared experiences that clearly extended beyond office hours. Last night was incredible. Read one message from 3 days earlier. I can't stop thinking about your presentation skills and other talents. Can't wait for our next private meeting. David's response was equally inappropriate. You bring out the best in me, Ashley, in all areas of my life. Tuesday can't come soon enough. Tuesday, that was today. The lunch wasn't just a business meeting. It was another chapter in whatever relationship had developed between my husband and his assistant. My hands trembled as I continued reading, uncovering months of correspondence that painted a picture of emotional and clearly physical intimacy. The messages revealed planning sessions for romantic dinners disguised as business meetings, weekend getaways explained as conference attendance, and intimate conversations about their future together. David had been living a double life, maintaining the facade of devoted husband and father while conducting a full-scale affair with Ashley. One email thread particularly devastated me. It was from the day before Sophia's birth, when I was in the hospital with dangerous blood pressure spikes. While I lay fighting for my life and my daughters, David had been exchanging messages with Ashley about their relationship. "I wish I could be there with you instead of dealing with this hospital drama," David had written. "Emma's been so demanding lately, and the timing couldn't be worse with the Meridian deal closing." Ashley's response was sympathetic and encouraging. "You're such a good man for staying there, but don't feel guilty about wanting to be elsewhere. Once the baby comes and things settle down, we'll have more freedom to be together properly." More freedom to be together properly. They were planning a future that explicitly excluded me and my newborn daughter. The hospital drama Ashley referred to was my life-threatening medical emergency, reduced to an inconvenience interfering with their romance. I sat staring at the laptop screen, feeling as though the ground had shifted beneath me. Everything I thought I knew about my marriage was a lie. David's distraction during Sophia's birth wasn't work stress. It was resentment at being trapped in a situation that interfered with his real relationship. The front door opened, and Patricia's voice called out from the entryway. I quickly closed the laptop and composed myself, not ready to reveal what I'd discovered. "Ah!" Patricia entered the kitchen carrying shopping bags and wearing the satisfied expression of someone who'd enjoyed an afternoon of gossip with her friends. "How was your bridge club?" I asked, hoping my voice sounded normal. "Enlightening," Patricia replied with a knowing smile. "Margaret Henderson mentioned seeing David and Ashley at Romano's last week. They looked quite comfortable together," she said. "Very professional, I'm sure." The casual cruelty of her comment took my breath away. Patricia knew exactly what was happening between David and Ashley, and she approved. Margaret Henderson was one of Phoenix's biggest gossips. If she was noticing David and Ashley's public appearances, their relationship was becoming common knowledge in Patricia's social circle. "Romano's is a beautiful restaurant," Patricia continued, unpacking groceries with deliberate precision. "Perfect for important business discussions. Ashley has such excellent taste in venues." The message was clear. Patricia supported David's relationship with Ashley and expected me to accept it gracefully. In her view, Ashley was a more suitable partner for her successful son, and my role was to step aside without causing embarrassment. "To the Chen family name? Where's Sophia?" Patricia asked, noticing the quiet house. "Napping in her crib," I replied, my voice barely steady. "Good, routine is so important for babies. Speaking of which, David called earlier to say he'll be quite late tonight." The investor meeting went very well, apparently, and Ashley suggested they continue discussions over dinner. Another evening of David choosing Ashley over his family. But now I understood that these weren't spontaneous business opportunities. They were planned encounters in an ongoing affair that had my mother-in-law's tacit approval. That evening, I sat in Sophia's nursery feeding her, while David texted updates about his extended business dinner. Each message was a transparent lie, and I found myself studying my daughter's perfect features while contemplating the dumb destruction of everything I'd believed about our family. Sophia's eyes were David's shape, but my color, a beautiful blend that should have represented the love between her parents. Instead, she was the product of a marriage that had already ended in all but name. Her father already committed to someone else, while maintaining the pretense of family obligation. When David finally came home after midnight, he smelled of expensive wine and unfamiliar perfume. Ashley's perfume, no doubt, lingering on his clothes as a reminder of how he'd spent his evening. He undressed quietly in our bathroom, assuming I was asleep, and slipped into bed without acknowledging my presence. I lay awake beside him, acutely aware of the physical and emotional distance between us. The man I'd married, the man who'd once cherished me above everything else, had become a stranger who tolerated me as an obligation while reserving his passion for someone else. The next morning brought a new revelation that solidified my understanding of how completely my life had changed. David was in the shower when his phone buzzed with a text message left on the nightstand. The preview was visible on the lock screen, and Ashley's name appeared with a message that made my blood run cold. "Thanks for last night. You made the right choice. Tuesday's appointment will change everything for us." Tuesday's appointment? What kind of appointment did David and Ashley have that would change everything? My mind raced through possibilities, each more devastating than the last. Was Ashley leaving the company to start her own business with David? Were they planning to formalize their relationship publicly? I heard the shower shut off and quickly returned to my side of the bed, pretending to sleep while David moved around the room preparing for another day of lies and deception. When he left for work, kissing my forehead with mechanical affection, I knew that Tuesday would bring the answer to questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered. But I also knew that whatever revelation awaited, I couldn't continue living in willful ignorance. My daughter deserved a mother who faced reality with courage, and I deserved a life built on truth rather than comfortable delusions. The pattern of discovery was accelerating, and soon there would be no more pretending that my marriage was anything other than a hollow arrangement designed to provide David with respectability while he pursued his real desires elsewhere. The only question remaining was what I would do with the truth once it was fully revealed. Tuesday arrived with the suffocating heat of an Arizona summer morning. It's the kind of weather that makes everything feel oppressive and inevitable. I woke early, Sophia's cries pulling me from restless sleep that had been punctuated by anxiety about whatever David and Ashley had planned. David was already gone, having left before dawn with a mumbled excuse about an early site inspection. Patricia appeared in the kitchen while I was preparing Sophia's bottle, her movements precise and purposeful as she started the coffee maker. She was dressed impeccably despite the early hour, her silver hair perfectly styled and her makeup flawless. Everything about her conveyed the message that important events were unfolding today. David mentioned he'll be quite late tonight, she said without preamble, not bothering with morning pleasantries. There's a significant business development that requires his full attention. The careful phrasing wasn't lost on me. Patricia never spoke casually about David's schedule. Every word was chosen to convey specific meaning. Today's business development was clearly the mysterious appointment Ashley had referenced in her text message. "What kind of business development?" I asked, testing her willingness to elaborate. Patricia's smile was practiced and empty. "The kind that secures futures," she replied cryptically. "David has always been exceptionally good at recognizing opportunities and acting decisively when necessary." The implication hung between us like desert heat shimmer, distorting everything it touched. Patricia knew exactly what was happening today, and her approval was evident in every carefully modulated word. Whatever David and Ashley had planned, it had the Chen family matriarch's full endorsement. After Patricia left for her morning yoga class, I made a decision that felt both reckless and necessary. I was going to follow David today and discover the truth about this appointment that would change everything. The physical demands of trailing someone while recovering from major surgery seemed insurmountable, but the alternative was spending another day in ignorant limbo while my life disintegrated around me. I called my mother, Linda, and asked if she could watch Sophia for the day. Mom had been offering to help since I came home from the hospital, but Patricia's overwhelming presence had made it clear that outside assistance wasn't welcome. Today, however, I needed someone I trusted completely. "Of course, Mia," Mom said immediately, using the endearment that always made me feel grounded. "Is everything all right? You sound stressed." "I just need to take care of some things," I replied, not ready to voice my suspicions aloud. "Patricia's out, and I could use a few hours." Mom arrived within 30 minutes, her warm presence immediately dispelling some of the cold efficiency that Patricia had imposed on our household. She took Sophia with natural ease, cooing in Spanish and settling into the rocking chair as if she belonged there. "Take all the time you need," she said, studying my face with the perceptive eyes of someone who'd raised 3 daughters. "Sometimes we have to face difficult truths to protect what matters most." Her words suggested she understood more than I'd revealed, but there wasn't time for deeper conversation. David's office was in downtown Phoenix, and if I was going to track his movements without being detected, I needed to position myself carefully. I drove slowly toward the business district, my surgical incisions protesting against the car seat and steering wheel. The downtown area was already bustling with morning traffic, office workers hurrying between air-conditioned buildings to avoid the climbing temperature. David's real estate company occupied the 15th floor of a gleaming tower on Central Avenue, with panoramic windows offering views of the sprawling desert metropolis. I parked across the street in a structure that provided visual access to the building's main entrance while keeping my car hidden among hundreds of others. The waiting felt interminable, each passing minute increasing my anxiety about what I might discover. Part of me hoped David would emerge alone, that my fears were unfounded and today would reveal nothing more than routine business activities. At 11:30, David appeared at the building entrance, but he wasn't alone. Ashley walked beside him, her hand resting casually on his arm, in a gesture of intimacy that spoke volumes. She was dressed elegantly in a flowing sundress that complemented her auburn hair, looking radiant and excited about whatever lay ahead. They walked to David's BMW, and he opened the passenger door for her with the gallant attention I remembered. From our early courtship, Ashley smiled up at him with obvious affection before settling into the seat. And David's expression as he closed her door was tender and protective. I followed them through Phoenix traffic, maintaining distance while my heart hammered against my ribs. They drove north toward Scottsdale, passing upscale shopping centers and exclusive residential areas. The destination became clear when David turned into the parking lot of Desert Ridge Medical Center, a private facility known for catering to affluent patients. Medical center. The appointment was medical, but what kind of medical situation would involve both David and Ashley together? My mind raced through possibilities, each more troubling than the last. Were they seeking couples counseling? Was Ashley ill? The questions multiplied as I watched them enter the building together. David's hand protectively placed on Ashley's lower back. I waited 15 minutes before following them inside, using the time to compose myself and plan my approach. Medical Center's lobby was elegant and discreet, designed to provide privacy for high-profile patients. A directory near the elevators listed various specialists: cardiology, dermatology, and prominently featured obstetrics and gynecology. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Ashley was pregnant. The appointment was with an obstetrician, and David was there as the expectant father. While I had nearly died bringing his daughter into the world just 8 weeks ago, he was starting a new family with his mistress. I approached the reception desk with shaking hands. Inventing a story about meeting friends for a consultation? The receptionist, trained in medical discretion, wouldn't provide specific information about patients. But her professional demeanor confirmed that this was indeed the obstetrics wing of the facility. Finding a seat in the waiting area, I positioned myself behind a decorative plant that provided visual cover while allowing me to observe the consultation rooms. The wait stretched endlessly, my imagination conjuring images of David and Ashley receiving ultrasound photos of their baby, making plans for a future that had no place for me or Sophia. When they finally emerged from the consultation, both faces glowed with unmistakable joy. Ashley was clutching what appeared to be ultrasound images, and David's arm was wrapped protectively around her shoulders. They stopped near the scheduling desk, speaking in low tones with the receptionist about follow-up appointments. I strained to hear fragments of their conversation, catching words that confirmed my worst fears. 12 weeks, Ashley was saying excitedly. Everything looks perfect. David's response was too quiet to understand, but his body language conveyed pride and anticipation. 12 weeks pregnant? Ashley had conceived around the time I was hospitalized. With preeclampsia, when David was supposedly overwhelmed with work stress and worry about his wife and unborn daughter, instead, he'd been conducting an affair that had now produced another child. They left the medical center hand in hand, moving with the easy intimacy of an established couple, making plans for their shared future. I remained frozen in my hiding spot, struggling to process the magnitude of David's betrayal. He wasn't just having an affair. He was building an entirely new life with Ashley while maintaining the pretense of marriage to me. The drive home passed in a haze of shock and disbelief. My mother took one look at my face when I entered the house and immediately understood that whatever I'd discovered had been devastating. "Mia," she said gently, settling Sophia into her carrier, "do you want to talk about it? Kindness?" In her voice nearly broke my composure entirely. "David's having a baby with someone else," I managed to say, the words feeling surreal as they left my mouth. Mom's expression shifted from concern to fierce protectiveness. The transformation. Instant and absolute. That bastard, she said with quiet vehemence. While you were fighting for your life having his daughter, he was. She stopped herself, visibly struggling to contain her anger. What am I going to do? I asked, feeling overwhelmed by the impossibility of my situation. I can barely take care of Sophia by myself, and now there's going to be another baby. Patricia already treats me like an intruder in my own home, and if David has a child with Ashley, you're going to be strong, Mom said firmly. God, you're going to protect yourself and Sophia, and you're going to make sure that man faces consequences for what he's done. Her confidence was reassuring, but the practical reality seemed insurmountable. David controlled our finances, owned our house, and had his mother's unwavering support. Ashley was young, financially independent, and clearly had David's heart, in ways I no longer did. Fighting for my marriage felt like trying to reclaim something that had already been given away. That evening, David returned home later than usual, his demeanor unusually buoyant for someone who'd spent the day in business meetings. He kissed Sophia's forehead with genuine tenderness, played with her for several minutes, and seemed more present than he'd been in weeks. Good day at work? I asked carefully, watching his face for tells. Excellent day, he replied, his smile genuine and unguarded. Some very promising developments that could change everything for our family's future. Our family's future. The phrase had taken on an entirely different meaning now that I knew about Ashley's pregnancy. David was planning for a future that included multiple families, multiple children, and apparently expected me to participate in this arrangement without complaint. Patricia joined us for dinner, her mood matching David's unusual cheerfulness. She regaled us with stories from her afternoon shopping trip, describing expensive baby items she'd seen, and commenting on how quickly children grew out of their clothes. It's remarkable how much babies change in such a short time, she mused, glancing meaningfully at David. Before you know it, they're walking and talking, and you need to prepare for the next phase of family life. The next phase of family life. Another carefully coded message about the changes coming to our household. Patricia's comments were never accidental. Every observation was calculated to convey information or test reactions. After dinner, David retreated to his home office for what he claimed was financial planning and contract review. I could hear him on the phone through the closed door, his voice warm and animated in ways that had become foreign to our marriage. Everything went perfectly, he was saying. Dr. Martinez says you're both healthy and progressing beautifully. I can't wait to tell everyone officially. Tuesday night, definitely. We should celebrate properly. While I sat in our living room nursing our 8-week-old daughter, David was planning celebrations for the child he'd conceived with his mistress. The compartmentalization required to maintain such deception was staggering, yet he seemed to manage it effortlessly. Over the following days, David's behavior pattern shifted in subtle but significant ways. He was more attentive to Sophia's spending time playing with her and taking photos to share with unspecified recipients. His phone conversations became more frequent and secretive, often conducted in his car or during extended bathroom breaks. Patricia's visits increased in frequency and duration, her observations about household management becoming more pointed and critical. She questioned my parenting decisions, suggested improvements to Sophia's schedule, and made casual comments about women who couldn't handle the demands of modern motherhood. Some women thrive during this phase of life, she observed, while watching me struggle to fold laundry one-handed while holding Sophia. Others find it overwhelming and need additional support to maintain family stability. Additional support. The phrase was becoming Patricia's euphemism for whatever arrangement she and David had planned for managing his dual family obligations. In her view, my role was clearly diminishing while Ashley's importance continued to grow. The breaking point came during Sophia's 2-month pediatric appointment. David had promised to attend this visit, emphasizing its importance for tracking her developmental progress. We arrived at Dr. Williams's office together, presenting the appearance of concerned parents focused on their daughter's welfare. Sophia charmed everyone with her alertness and social responsiveness, reaching developmental milestones that filled me with maternal pride. Dr. Williams pronounced her progress excellent and began discussing upcoming immunizations and feeding schedules. During the consultation, David's phone buzzed repeatedly with text messages that he tried to check discreetly. Dr. Williams noticed his distraction and paused in her examination to address him directly. Mr. Chen, do you have any questions about Sophia's development or care requirements? No, everything sounds perfect, David replied automatically, though he'd clearly missed most of the discussion. Emma handles all the day-to-day care, so she's the expert on Sophia's needs. The dismissive comment stung, reducing my role to that of caretaker, while positioning himself as the removed provider. Dr. Williams's expression tightened slightly, suggesting she'd noticed the dynamic between us. As we prepared to leave, David's phone rang with a call he apparently couldn't ignore. I need to take this, he said apologetically. It's urgent business that can't wait. He stepped into the hallway, leaving me to manage Sophia's car seat and diaper bag alone. Through the partially open door, I could hear his side of the conversation. The tone was unmistakably personal rather than professional. No, I promised to be there for the next appointment, he was saying quietly. This pediatric visit ran longer than expected, but I'll make it up to you. Of course it's important. Our baby is just as significant as... Yes, I understand. You're nervous about the announcement? Our baby. David was discussing Ashley's pregnancy in terms that positioned it as equally important to Sophia's welfare, making plans for announcements that would presumably reshape our family's public image. When he returned to the examination room, his expression had shifted to one of barely contained excitement mixed with guilt. Sorry about that, he said to Dr. Williams. A crisis at work that needed immediate attention. Dr. Williams nodded politely, but her professional assessment of our family dynamics was clearly unfavorable. So we left the office, she made a point of giving me her direct contact information and emphasizing that she was available for any concerns about Sophia's welfare or my own recovery. The drive home was silent. David lost in thoughts about his afternoon plans while I contemplated the reality that my husband was actively preparing to announce another woman's pregnancy to the world. The timing couldn't be coincidental. Was probably far enough along now to safely share the news. David was ready to begin the process of legitimizing their relationship. That evening, while David prepared for another extended business dinner, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. I was going to confront the situation directly, but not in the way anyone expected. Instead of demanding explanations or pleading for his attention, I was going to begin planning my own future independently of David's deceptions. Patricia's casual cruelties, David's blatant lies, and Ashley's obvious pregnancy had created a situation that no amount of loyalty or forgiveness could repair. My daughter deserved a mother who faced reality with courage and wisdom, and I deserved a life built on honesty rather than comfortable delusions. The war for my dignity and Sophia's future was about to begin, and this time I would be fighting. On my own terms, the Phoenix skyline shimmered in the distance as I sat in my car outside Romano's restaurant. Watching David and Ashley through the floor-to-ceiling windows, they were seated at an intimate corner table, their heads bent together over what appeared to be ultrasound photographs spread across the white tablecloth. Ashley's hand rested protectively over her still flat stomach, while David's fingers traced the edges of the images with obvious wonder. I had followed them here after David's supposed emergency client meeting, watching him pick up Ashley from her downtown loft before driving to this upscale establishment where Phoenix's elite conducted their most important business. But this wasn't business. This was a celebration dinner for the family they were creating together while I sat at home with our 8-week-old daughter. Believing his lies about working late, through the restaurant's windows, I watched David raise his wine glass and a toast while Ashley lifted what appeared to be sparkling cider. Their expressions were radiant with shared joy and anticipation, the kind of happiness that should have belonged to us when Sophia was born. Instead, David had been distracted and resentful during my pregnancy, his attention already claimed by the woman who now carried his second child. The Mater D approached their table with what looked like a special dessert, complete with a small sparkler that caught Ashley's delighted attention. She clapped her hands together like a child receiving an unexpected gift. and David's face softened with the tender affection I remembered from our early relationship. He reached across the table to take her hand, bringing it to his lips for a gentle kiss that spoke of deep emotional connection. My phone buzzed with a text message from David. Client dinner running very late. Don't wait up. Important contract negotiations. The casual lie arrived while I watched him feed Ashley a bite of dessert, their laughter carrying through the restaurant's ambience, even from my distant vantage point. The disconnect between his message and reality was so stark, it felt surreal. Like watching a movie about someone else's life rather than witnessing the destruction of my own marriage. I drove home through the desert darkness, my mind racing with implications and possibilities. David's deception had reached a level that required immediate action, but confronting him directly would only result in more elaborate lies and gaslighting. Patricia would support whatever story he fabricated, and Ashley would remain the innocent victim, caught between a troubled marriage and true love. When I arrived home, Patricia was waiting in the living room with Sophia sleeping peacefully in her arms. She looked up with practiced concern, her expression carefully composed to convey just the right amount of sympathy.
"How was your evening, dear?" she asked,
though her tone suggested she already knew exactly how I'd spent my time. You look quite tired. Perhaps you should rest while Sophia is sleeping so peacefully. The gentle suggestion carried an undertone of warning. Patricia knew I'd been following David, and her message was clear. Pursuing this path would only lead to embarrassment and defeat. In her view, I should accept the situation gracefully and focus on my role as Sophia's caretaker while David built his real future with Ashley. "Where's David?" I asked, testing her willingness to maintain the pretense. "Still at his business dinner," Patricia replied smoothly, such dedication to his clients. Ashley mentioned that tonight's negotiations could secure several major contracts for next year. Patricia was in direct communication with Ashley about David's schedule, confirming that the entire Chen family was complicit. In maintaining this elaborate deception, I wasn't just being betrayed by my husband. I was being systematically excluded from a conspiracy that included his mother and Mistress. "I think I'll wait up for him," I said, settling into the opposite chair. Patricia's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Emma, dear, you really should prioritize rest while you're still recovering. David mentioned that you've seemed quite emotional lately, and exhaustion can make everything feel more dramatic than it actually is." Emotional, dramatic, the familiar words used to dismiss women's legitimate concerns and gaslight them into questioning their own perceptions. Patricia was deploying the full arsenal of manipulation techniques, painting my reactions as unstable while positioning David's behavior as reasonable and justified. "I'm feeling fine," I replied evenly. "Actually, I'm feeling clearer than I have in months." Something in my tone must have alerted Patricia to a shift in my demeanor. She studied my face with shrewd assessment, recognizing that her usual tactics weren't having their intended effect. "Clarity is important," she said carefully, "especially when making decisions that affect not just yourself, but Sophia's future. Children need stability above all else, and sometimes that requires personal sacrifices from their mothers. Personal sacrifices." Patricia was already preparing the narrative that would justify whatever arrangement David proposed for managing his dual family obligations. In her version, I would be the selfish wife who couldn't accept her husband's needs, while Ashley would be the understanding woman who helped David achieve his full potential. David returned home after midnight. Moving quietly through the house with the practiced stealth of someone accustomed to concealing his activities, I was sitting in the living room with only the soft glow of Sophia's baby monitor providing illumination, and he started when he noticed my silhouette in the darkness. "Emma," he said, his voice carefully modulated to convey surprise rather than guilt. "I thought you'd be asleep by now." The contract negotiations went much later than expected. "How did they go?" I asked, my tone conversational. "Very well," David replied automatically. Ashley's preliminary research made all the difference in understanding the client's needs. She has such insight into market trends. Even now, even in our darkened living room at past midnight, he couldn't stop himself from praising Ashley. Her name was never far from his lips, her contributions always central to his professional successes. "That's wonderful," I said quietly. I'm sure you'll want to reward her hard work appropriately. David's expression shifted slightly, alert to some undercurrent in my words that he couldn't quite identify. She's already proven herself invaluable to the business, he said carefully. I'm lucky to have found someone so dedicated. The phrase could describe a professional relationship or something far more personal, in David's choice of words revealed how thoroughly his two relationships had merged in his mind. I'm sure you are, I replied, rising from the chair with deliberate calm. I think I'll go to bed now. Sophia will be awake early for her feeding. David watched me move toward the stairs, his expression puzzled by my lack of questions or complaints. About his late return, he was accustomed to deflecting my concerns with elaborate explanations. But my apparent acceptance seemed to unsettle him more than accusations would have. The next morning brought a phone call that changed everything. My friend Rachel Thompson, who worked as a nurse at Phoenix General, called while I was feeding Sophia her morning bottle. Emma, she said without preamble, I need to tell you something. And you're not going to like it. Rachel's directness was one of the qualities I'd always appreciated about our friendship. She didn't waste time with diplomatic phrasing when important information needed to be shared. David was here yesterday. With a pregnant woman, she continued. They were in the obstetrics wing for what looked like a routine prenatal appointment. I almost didn't recognize him at first because he seemed so different. Happy, excited, very attentive to the woman with him. The confirmation of what I'd witnessed hit harder coming from an independent source. Rachel had no agenda beyond concern. For my welfare and her professional observation carried weight that my own emotional reactions might not. How far along did she look? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Maybe 3 months, based on what I could observe. Emma, I'm so sorry. I debated whether to call you, but I felt like you needed to know. In 3 months. Ashley had conceived while I was in the hospital fighting for my life, when David was supposedly overwhelmed with worry about his wife and newborn daughter. The timeline made his betrayal even more devastating, revealing calculated deception, rather than spontaneous infidelity. After ending the call with Rachel, I sat holding Sophia while my mind raced through options and consequences. David's affair wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a deliberate choice to build a new life with Ashley while maintaining the facade of marriage to me. Patricia's behavior confirmed that the Chen family viewed this arrangement as acceptable, even preferable. The sound of David's car in the driveway interrupted my thoughts. He entered the house with obvious excitement, carrying his laptop bag and what appeared to be a bottle of champagne. His mood was jubilant in ways I hadn't seen since our early relationship, and he moved through the house with the energy of someone celebrating significant news. Good morning, he said, kissing Sophia's forehead with genuine tenderness before turning to me with a smile that seemed almost apologetic. I have something important to discuss with you. Something important. The conversation I'd been dreading was finally arriving, and David's demeanor suggested he believed I would be receptive to whatever proposal he was about to present. What is it? I asked, though my tone probably conveyed that I'd already suspected the answer. David settled into the chair across from me, his expression shifting to one of practiced sincerity. Emma, I know things have been difficult between us lately. The pregnancy, Sophia's birth, my work demands, everything has been overwhelming for both of us. The careful phrasing was designed to distribute blame equally while positioning recent events as external stressors rather than consequences of his choices. David was preparing to present his betrayal as a solution to our mutual problems rather than the cause of them. I've been thinking about our future, he continued. I believe we need to make some changes that will benefit everyone involved, especially Sophia. Everyone involved. The phrase clearly included Ashley and her unborn child, confirming that David was about to propose some form of arrangement that legitimized his dual family obligations. What kind of changes? I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the trembling. In my hands. David leaned forward with the earnest expression he used during his most important sales presentations. Ashley is pregnant, he said simply, as if this revelation should come as welcome news rather than devastating betrayal. We're going to have another child, and I want to handle this situation in a way that honors my responsibilities to both of my families, both of my families. David had already reframed his affair as a legitimate second family, deserving equal consideration with his marriage to me. In his mind, he wasn't destroying our relationship. He was expanding his definition. A family to include everyone he cared about. The silence stretched between us like a chasm as David waited for my response to his announcement. He sat there with that practiced smile, genuinely believing that I would accept his proposal to maintain two families, as if it were a reasonable business arrangement. Sophia stirred in my arms, her tiny fingers grasping at the air, and something crystallized inside me with absolute clarity. "No," I said simply, my voice steady and calm. David's confident expression faltered. "Emma, you haven't heard my full proposal yet? I've thought this through carefully, and I believe we can make this work for everyone." "No," I repeated, standing up with Sophia cradled against my chest. "There is no proposal that makes this acceptable. There is no arrangement that honors your responsibilities to both families. There is only the family you choose, and you've already made that choice." His face flushed with frustration at my refusal to engage with his elaborate justifications. "You're being unreasonable, Ashley. And I care about each other, but that doesn't mean I love you or Sophia any less. Modern families can look different, and with proper planning, modern families," I interrupted, my voice gaining strength with each word, "are built on honesty, respect, and mutual consent. You've offered me none of those things. You've lied, deceived and betrayed our marriage while I nearly died bringing your daughter into this world." David stood up abruptly, his composure cracking as he realized his carefully rehearsed presentation wasn't going according to plan. "This doesn't have to be dramatic, Emma. Ashley and I are committed to each other, but I want to provide for her. Sophia, too. We can work out custody arrangements, financial support." "Get out," I said quietly, my words cutting through his stammered explanations like a blade through silk. "What?" David looked genuinely shocked, as if the possibility of rejection had never occurred to him. "Get out of this house. Pack your things and leave. If you want to be with Ashley and plan your new family, go do that. But you don't get to keep me as a backup plan while you pursue your real desires." Patricia appeared in the doorway as if summoned by the tension in the room. Her face was carefully composed, but I could see the calculation behind her eyes as she assessed the situation. "Emma, dear," she began in her most patronizing tone, "perhaps you should think carefully before making rash decisions. David is offering you security and stability for Sophia's future. Many women would be grateful for such generous terms." "Many women," I replied, turning to face her directly, "don't have enough self-respect to accept crumbs from their husband's table while he feasts elsewhere." Patricia's mask slipped momentarily, revealing cold fury at my defiance. "You're making a mistake. David can provide for Sophia in ways you never could alone. Your pride is going to cost your daughter opportunities, my daughter," I said. "Firmly, will grow up knowing that her mother chose dignity over convenience. She'll learn that love isn't something you negotiate or share like a business contract." David was pacing now, running his hands through his hair as his perfect plan disintegrated. "This is insane, Emma. You can't just throw away 7 years of marriage because you're jealous of Ashley. We can make this work if you're reasonable. Jealous?" The word sparked something fierce inside me. "David, I'm not jealous of Ashley. I pity her. She's in love with a man who lies as easily as he breathes, who will cheat on her just like he cheated on me when someone younger and more exciting comes along." The truth of my words hit David like a physical blow. For the first time since this conversation began, he looked uncertain, perhaps glimpsing his own pattern of behavior with uncomfortable clarity. "That's not I would never," he started, but the protest died on his lips as he realized how hollow it sounded. "It already did," I said simply. "Ashley believes she's different, that what you have is special and unique. But she's exactly where I was 7 years ago, convinced that she's the exception to your pattern." Patricia stepped forward, her voice sharp with authority. "This family will not be torn apart by melodrama. David has made his choice, and Ashley is carrying a Chen grandchild. You need to accept reality and work within it." "You're right," I said, surprising them both with my agreement. "David has made his choice, and so have I. I choose myself, and Sophia, I choose a life built on truth, instead of comfortable lies. I walked past both of them toward the stairs, Sophia sleeping peacefully in my arms. I'll be staying at my mother's house while you pack your things. David, have your lawyer contact mine about custody and divorce proceedings. Emma, wait, David called after me, desperation creeping into his voice for the first time. We don't need lawyers? We can work this out ourselves like adults? I paused at the foot of the stairs and turned back to look at him one final time. Adults tell the truth, David. Adults honor their commitments. Adults don't create elaborate lies to justify their selfishness. You stopped being an adult the moment you chose deception over honesty. 2 weeks later, I sat in my lawyer's office reviewing the divorce settlement David's attorney had proposed. It was generous financially, more than fair in terms of Sophia's support, and designed to resolve everything quickly and quietly. David wanted to avoid the scandal of contested proceedings, especially with Ashley's pregnancy beginning to show. He's offering you the house, my lawyer explained. Full custody of Sophia with reasonable visitation rights and substantial alimony. Mr. Chen clearly wants to minimize public attention to his personal circumstances. I signed the papers without hesitation. David's money couldn't repair the damage he'd done, but it would provide security for Sophia's future while I rebuilt my life independently. 6 months later, I received a phone call from Rachel that brought unexpected closure to the entire ordeal. David and Ashley's relationship had imploded spectacularly when she discovered he'd been having an affair with another employee, pattern that apparently predated even his relationship with her. She's 8 months pregnant and he's already moved on, Rachel reported with disgust. Patricia is furious because Ashley's threatening to expose everything publicly. The whole Chen family reputation is about to become very messy. I felt no satisfaction in their downfall, only relief that I'd escaped before becoming another casualty of David's inability to remain faithful to anyone. Sophia was crawling now, exploring our new apartment with fearless curiosity, her laughter filling spaces that had once echoed with lies and manipulation. My mother helped with childcare while I completed my certification in nonprofit management, preparing to return to work in a field that aligned with my values. The future looked different than I'd planned, but it was built on truth and self-respect, rather than convenient deceptions. Sometimes I wondered if David ever thought about the family he'd destroyed in pursuit of his selfish desires. But mostly I focused forward, teaching Sophia through my example that love is something you build with honesty, not something you negotiate with lies. I had almost died in childbirth, but I'd been reborn in truth, and that made all the difference. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.